Welcome to Takeaways, Life Lessons Learned. My guest today is Liz Ortenberg. Huh?
Yeah.
I did it pretty good. Liz is the CEO of SafeNest, a leading nonprofit dedicated to ending domestic and sexual violence. So I understand you celebrated your 8th year as the CEO recently.
I did on March 1st.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
How did 8 years feel? Was it like just another year, or was it milestone-ish?
You know, I have school-age children, so that's always a marker, right? When I started working there, both my kids were little, and now one's in high school and one's in middle school. So that helps add some depth to the years. But, my predecessor was there for 38 years. SafeNest has only had 2 CEOs. So I feel like I still have 30 years to go.
38 years. Wow. That's funny.
Yeah.
You really think 30 years?
No. But I'm going to do my best.
All right. So kind of working backwards, today you're the CEO of SafeNest. Most previously before that, you were the CEO of Girl Scouts. Is that like Girl Scouts? Big Girl Scouts,
No,
local Girl Scouts?
Not the National Girl Scouts. In fact, the reason I moved to Las Vegas was to be the CEO of Girl Scouts of Southern Nevada.
Okay.
So I did that for 3 years here.
You know what? When I saw that, I'm picturing the movie, was it Goldie Hawn?
Yeah, Troop Beverly Hills.
Troop, yes.
Yes. Well, I have many family members who still think I'm a camp counselor in some glorified fashion. So,
well, isn't that what you did before?
I did. And then when I came to SafeNest, we started a camp program. It's called Camp Hope. It's a national program. We run the Southern Nevada portion of it. And this year we're taking 100 kids to Catalina Island for a week. So
is that on my list of your services? I don't think it is.
I can't seem to get away from the benefits and beauty of camp in my life. So I'm happy to have it continue to be a glorified camp counselor in my family's eyes.
So you did Girl Scouts for 3 years, but before that, for 5 years, you were at YMCA and various camps, right?
Yep.
That they have, not like the community center. You're at a camp.
Yeah, I was up in Big Bear, California, running the 2 camps they have up there, in Mammoth, California, running that camp. And then I was up in Washington running a camp on the Puget Sound, which was, what a gift. You just sit in your office and watch kids sail by. It's a tough day.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, let's go all the way back. You're British.
I am British.
And you moved here to the States when you were 5.
Yes.
So give me that story.
Yeah. So my parents are both British citizens, British and Australian citizens. And my grandmother, long before I was born, remarried a gentleman in the CIA and high up in the CIA. And we had an opportunity to get green cards. And anyone that lives overseas knows that's like winning the lottery. And so we relocated from England to the United States because of that opportunity. And I am very happy we did. I have loved every minute of it. But my family history is always interesting. So if you've ever watched Downton Abbey, I come from this sort of aristocracy of British families of that time, right? But in Downton Abbey, they learn how to sort of retool their money and make it work. I was on the other side of that coin. So my parents were actually the last generation of that historical wealth. I'm happy I wasn't in their generation because I think it's hard to grow up in one life circumstance and then travel through life and be in a very different financial circumstance. So I've always been thankful for my place geographically in the United States and also as it relates to my family legacy.
So when you moved here and you were 5, where did you move?
So it wasn't rough. We moved to the Napa Valley.
Oh, very nice.
My dad, I know.
Back then, was it the Napa Valley that we think of today?
It was, except for Calistoga was like the slum. Like today I hear people go, oh, I'm going to a spa in Calistoga. I'm like, my parents would not let me go visit a friend if they lived in Calistoga when I was growing up. But it was...
Why? How for Napa Valley? Like, what was the point of connection?
So my grandmother lived there. So it was easy to be close to her.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was a farmer. So relatively inexpensively, we were able to get land. And he began doing hydroponic, high-end organic vegetables, which unfortunately was before his time. He was before his time because the farm eventually went bankrupt. But my mom worked in a winery. My dad worked in the farm, and that was life until I was about 13 years old. And I can't say it was too bad. I mean, like a lot of families, we had unhappiness behind closed doors. But from a childhood experience, I mean, I go down to the creek with my dog and go fishing and ride motorcycles and, rural life. It was idyllic in a lot of aspects.
And what happened at 13?
At 13, I got shipped off to Catholic boarding school, which is not uncommon for British children. Boarding school is a part of our sort of life. But my parents divorced. The farm, my dad lost the farm, that went bankrupt. Then, of course, the divorce. And then my sister and I, who were both at boarding school, she's 2 years older than me, didn't really have a place to land. So we ended up, when I was 15 and my sister was 17, we ended up living with my dad, who had unfortunately sort of descended into drug abuse at that time. And so, yeah, I cannot complain about my childhood and the circumstances in which I grew up, but that was a big life-altering sort of event for us. The divorce and then living with my dad, that was tough.
So 15 to, I know from your resume that you went to California State, Fresno.
Yes.
And you studied Parks, Recreation, and Leisure Studies?
Yes, I did.
With business. It says / business.
I got a business minor. My mantra was, someone has to organize fun. Why shouldn't it be me? And then yet here I am working in domestic violence. So those choices are interesting ones. But that degree did me very well. One of the things that held me through the difficult times in my childhood was I was a talented, hardworking runner. And I got a scholarship to Fresno State, which is how I ended up there. And so that's, I probably, had I had my druthers chosen a different university, but Fresno was offering pretty much a full scholarship, and I didn't have any parental unit at that time. So I actually turned into a phenomenal experience. I loved being at Fresno State. I loved the atmosphere of coaching. My degree was perfect for me at the time. So yeah.
What kind of running?
Distance running. So I was cross country, and then I did the 5 and 10,000 meters in track.
Nice.
Yeah. Actually went to BYU and for our conference championship and won the 10,000 meter on their home turf at altitude. So, little bragging.
I feel like this is a point of pride.
Bragging rights. Yeah. Well, anytime you walk into an altitude school and win the 10,000, that's some chops. So I'm very proud of that.
Short distances are not my thing because you have to run fast and hard, right?
Yeah.
I don't do that. I do long and slow.
Yes. That's me. It takes me
and they give you a medal when you finish my kind of runs. Did you get a medal when you got this?
I did. I got a nice little trophy, but my fastest mile is inside of a 10K. So I can't all out run as fast as I can inside of a 10,000 meter race.
That makes sense though.
Yeah.
What is your fastest mile?
It is 5:02.
Come on.
That's right.
Right now, if you were going to go run a mile,
hang on,
and you were trying, you got to warm up. What do you think you would do it in?
So, okay, I'm going to say pre-cancer because I had a little run-in with cancer. So pre-cancer, I think I could run probably a 6:30 mile. Post-cancer, I'm not even finishing. You're calling 911 probably
really
400 meters in. At this point in my recovery, yeah, I'm still struggling.
Yeah. I became a runner at 40-ish.
Okay.
And 2 miles, thought I was going to die.
Yeah.
Learned how to run. You did the different paces, easy pace, fartleks, that kind of thing. I never really got into speed.
Yeah.
Just more distance. And you go from 2 to 3 to 5. And then I did 8. And then if you do 8, you could do a half marathon. You do that. If I could do a half, I could do a full. And
so what's your marathon PR?
It's sub 4:3:51, I think.
Mine is 2:53. So I missed qualifying for the Olympic trials by 3 minutes.
Wow.
But you missed qualifying by 26 miles because you got to run the whole 26 if you're going to make it, right? So yeah, but I love running. I mean, I still, as soon as I'm able again, will be very happy to get it back into my workout routine.
Awesome.
So congratulations.
I mean, we can do the rest of this episode about running, but we're not going to do that.
That would be great.
We were talking about your time at Fresno, and you also have an MBA, but I imagine that came later.
He did. Much later.
But it wasn't here in the States.
It was not.
Tell me about that.
So I went to ESA in Barcelona, which is the third ranked best business school in the world. And I did that for two reasons. At the time, financially, it made sense. The euro was, really weak against the dollar. So financially, it seemed like a good decision. It didn't hold throughout my whole MBA that was true. But I'm also, because I'm a dual citizen, going into an MBA program in Europe is advantageous because if I had wanted to relocate to Europe, that transition would be quite easy from that MBA program. But the second reason was, and less sexy, as they say, American business schools or U.S. business schools require that you've taken calculus. And at Fresno State, while I had a great time, my starting math was math for athletes. It was me and Tarkanians.
Was that actually
math
a class?
For athletes, math
Seriously?
4A. And it was me, the football players, and Tarkanians basketball team that was in this math for athletes. I'm not a gifted mathematician. And so I didn't have to take calculus to get into a European grad school. So those are the two reasons I ended up. And I mean, gosh, who doesn't want to spend 2 years in Barcelona? But I spent a year in Barcelona, then 6 months in Australia.
As part of the MBA?
As part of the MBA. And then I finished up in Barcelona. So it was a phenomenal experience.
Well, at what point in your career did you get your MBA?
I was 30 when I went into my MBA. And part of the reason ESA was a great choice for me was because they don't take people that are on a continuous education track. They only take people that have 5 to 10 years of solid work experience because the entire structure of the MBA is case study. And you don't want to do a case study with someone that has no experience.
Mm-hmm.
You want to do a case study with somebody coming from China to talk about child labor. You're going to have a much richer discussion than you are in circumstances where people haven't really worked yet. So phenomenal experience. I recommend to everybody, wait to get your master's degree. For me, it made a lot of sense. Business, it makes a lot of sense.
Was this between YMCA and SafeNest or?
No. So I graduated from my MBA in 2008 during the recession.
Oh, yeah.
I
remember
had
that.
8 job opportunities in consulting and they all dried up.
Wow.
So I went from in March when I was interviewing 8 offers to May when I graduated, no offers. So fortunately, my background from the Girl Scouts, which was before my MBA, was great to lead me into the YMCA. So I went back to Los Angeles area, and that's when I started running the camps up there. And then I went up to Washington to run their camps, and then I was recruited here to be the CEO of Girl Scouts. So
I'm curious on the MBA. How did that change you as a professional?
When you go internationally, it gives you a lot of insight to American privilege, not in a bad way. And I always often say it's access, right? As U.S. citizens, we have access to a lot of things, from walking into a grocery store and having all the choices that we have to not being beholden to a class structure as our kiddos grow up, right? You realize living overseas how fortunate we are. Part of the reason I wanted to also go to Europe was George Bush had been reelected, and I thought that was the worst thing that could ever happen to our country. Fast forward to 2025. But I'll tell you, it gave me perspective on how fortunate we are as U.S. citizens. I'm fortunate all the way through, from getting a green card to being able to travel to the jobs that I've held. This kind of access to things, even if you're growing up in poverty here, does not exist in other countries. Poverty is moving out of that poverty structure in most of our countries, even our allied countries, is unheard of. But here, there's at least the possibility of a pathway out very differently. But, you also get a very different sense of the world when you're talking to people who are from high net worth families in Brazil, India, Russia, all over the world. When you're talking to folks who are making the decisions of who are the next tier of leadership, like we had the Prince of Azerbaijan, one of the princes of Azerbaijan was in my class, and talking to him about, the caviar trade in Azerbaijan and how they're trying to diversify their economy, right? I'm not going to get that kind of conversation in a normal program. So just walked out of there with such rich experiences, phenomenal group of friends, but stories and understanding of the world in a way I never could have gathered if I would have just simply stayed in the U.S.
You have 2 kids?
I have 2 wonderful children. Yes. I have a 12-year-old little girl who is an absolute pistol. She's a lot like her mom, so I try to be patient.
Is she running yet?
She's a runner.
She is?
Their cross-country team at Sig Rogich Middle School was the champions. I think county champions would be the right word to say. So I was super happy to see her running, but she prefers soccer. So I'm working through that with some therapy. And then my son, who is, I did Ancestry DNA several years ago, and 10% of my bloodline is Norwegian. My son must be like got 100% of that because he's built like a Viking. I think he's almost 6 feet, 5'11", but he's well over 200 pounds and playing football for Palo Verde High School. So I'm just loving every minute of them growing up. I mean, it's happening too fast, but gosh, they're amazing.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. So you're a CEO, an MBA, a Girl Scout, a camper, a hiker, a runner. You're ambitious, a visionary, innovative, intelligent, tenacious, resilient. Do you know where I got these?
No, on my dating
passionate.
profile?
Let me finish and I'll tell you. Passionate, a badass, strong, persevering, empowering, energetic, brave, a champion, confident, and tenacious. That came from your anniversary video that your team did.
That was so sweet. That's one of those moments. I watched it in my car for some reason. Linda sent me the link, my marketing person, and I just cried. I mean, the work we do is really hard, but I love what I do every single day. And I know from my experiences at ESA and travel that I've done around the world, I am so blessed to be able to be in a job that I love to get up to and go to, no matter how hard it is, no matter what happens. I absolutely love what I do. So that video was such a treat. Yeah.
So officially welcome to Takeaways, Liz.
Thank you.
All right. The CEO of SafeNest. You took over for the founder. What called you into this line of work? Is it a calling?
So I wouldn't have said it started that way. So I was at Girl Scouts. I was ready for a change. And I had lunch with a phenomenal friend of mine who's a consultant in town, Stacy Wedding. And she said, SafeNest is looking for a new executive director. And I said, Stace, I'm not really interested in animals, especially not birds. Like most people, no idea what SafeNest really did. And so she's like, Liz, it's domestic violence. And I wasn't really familiar with the phrase or really the movement of domestic violence. So I took a weekend class. They have these online classes you can take. And I said, I think I can do something here. My passion in nonprofits has always been the business side, legislation, government affairs, building a financial security and all those things. But I got excited about this idea of there's a lot that can be done in the domestic violence space. It's a fairly new movement. We've only really been active since the 1970s. So in relation to the YMCA and Girl Scouts, that's relatively young. So I got super passionate about it from watching that. Fortunately, met with the board of directors and they hired me, and it's been phenomenal ever since.
You mentioned earlier the previous executive was there for 38 years.
Yeah.
Was that the founder of SafeNest or not the founder?
So not technically. Estelle Murphy is a phenomenal individual. She came in as their first paid staff person, from what I understand. And it was a little bit after a group of volunteers had founded the organization. But Estelle, took it from this small little agency. At the time, I think they had 12 beds to when I started, we had 70 beds at our shelter. We have many more than that now. But yeah, she really moved the agency through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. Yeah.
What's the origin story of SafeNest?
So in 1977, which is when most of agencies like SafeNest were established, federal funding first became available for domestic violence. There was a horrible, two things happened. I can't remember exactly what state it was, but essentially a woman had been abused by her husband. And a trigger warning for anyone who's listening that for this may be sensitive. She had put in complaint. The police really weren't taking her seriously. She was staying at a friend's house. Her husband came to the door. They called the police. He dragged her out onto the lawn, and the police were standing there while he stabbed her, and they did not intervene. This is sort of the seminal case of domestic violence getting the attention it needed.
They didn't intervene because at the time
They didn't intervene.
It's like that's between a husband and a wife kind of a thing?
Correct. And so it's hard for us to fathom that today, but that was not the world we were living in the 70s. And so she then amazingly got her druthers and sued the police department.
Oh, she lived.
She lived, and she won a huge settlement. That then got police departments around the country garnering attention. That's when abusive partner treatment programs started. That's when domestic violence agencies started to get the primary funding stream from the federal government. And then, of course, in the 90s, when OJ allegedly killed Nicole. I know that was not proven in court, criminal court anyway. But when that happened, then the whole other increase of funding around Violence Against Women's Act and FIPSA and other funding streams came in. But that's really the origin story of most domestic violence agencies. Is it somewhere in the late 70s, you started to get federal funding and an agency was established.
So do you know here how it was started?
I just know it was a well-intentioned group of volunteers. I don't even know their names. I do know that they started out with a very small program. I think it was like 12 beds, and it was only shelter. And then it grew over the years. I know in the 80s.
So this is like someone needs to get out of their domestic violence situation and they need a place to go.
Correct.
So this is the place they go.
Correct.
That was the program.
That was it. That was what we were doing.
Because it's much more, we're going to talk about it, but it's much more complex
more robust now.
Yeah, okay.
And then I know in the 80s, we ran into some financial troubles, and Wayne Newton actually invested in the agency. And then eventually we moved in the later 80s to the location where our shelter is today, which is a confidential location. But we were then able to expand to 4 houses, and the rest has sort of been growing ever since. So and that is very common around the country. It was a small group of well-intentioned volunteers that started these programs, and it really was that. It was a place to escape to when you were in danger of being abused and or killed.
So tell me just high level, the structure and size of the organization today.
Yeah, so we are, give or take, a $10 million a year agency. 50% of that funding comes from the government. 50% of that funding comes from phenomenal donors, our business arms, and grants, the non-government grants. So, so we have 6 client-facing departments. We serve almost 12,000 clients a year. Over 170,000 services are delivered.
12,000 new clients a year, or this like once they're...
Generally, I would say 90% of that are new every year. Yeah. We are the largest agency in the state. We're one of the largest in the country and we've really only focused on Clark County because the need here is so high.
All right. Before we get too far into takeaways,
yeah,
I ask everyone this question. What has been the single most influential thing or event in your life that has shaped you the most?
Yeah. So again, I'll give everybody a little bit of a trigger warning because this is not always easy to listen to when people share something difficult in their life. So when I was 15 years old, my dad tried to kill himself. In a very visual way. He slit his wrists and was waiting for my sister and I and a group of friends. We used to kind of hang out in the basement at the house that my dad was renting. And he chose to do this in a very visible way. And so unfortunately, that happened. That night, he, of course, went into the hospital because he almost died. That same night, I was sexually assaulted by a friend of my sister's. It was just this whirlwind of this entire shattering of my, all my idyllic childhood. And even though we were living with my dad and my parents were divorced, I was in Santa Cruz. Things were, I was a happy kid. That moment in time, that night in time was just this horrific series of events that really changed the trajectory of my life because there were a couple of options. I mean, I was surrounded by drugs and I certainly thought about numbing the pain of what was going on in that space. But thank goodness, and I'm so thankful for this, and it's why I push sports and camp in my life. I was running, and I knew that if I went down the path that many of my sisters and my friends that we were surrounded with that were using drugs, if I went down that path, I was going to lose everything, because running was my only way out. But yeah, that night was the night that I think I just grew up in about 3 hours. So yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay. Trauma happens. We know that most kids that are experiencing juvenile detention and all those kinds of things are not bad people. They're growing up in trauma. And kids that on a trauma scale of 1 to 10 grow up with a trauma score of 4 or higher, which I can attest to. My brother fell into drugs. My sister was pregnant at a young age. This trauma can really influence your life. And for whatever reason, running was my lifeline, but I was insulated from experiencing what a lot of our kids experience and turning to the wrong vices. So I feel very, very, in that heartache, I feel very fortunate.
How many people, generally speaking, do you think are walking around with trauma?
So the national average is 1.5 trauma markers per person.
This is like any kind of trauma?
Yeah, Kaiser
Not necessarily.
Permanente did a study. So there's
Okay.
sorry, let me sort of couch that. Adverse childhood experiences, otherwise known as ACEs, is trauma that's experienced under the age of 18. So we know that on average, society is walking around with 1.5 of those trauma markers. And divorce is one, but there's a lot. They fall into 3 different categories. But kids that experience 4 or more adverse childhood experiences are like, don't quote me on all the numbers, but like 1,200% more likely to be an intravenous drug user. That is your next generation of victims and perpetrators of sexual assault and domestic violence. These are the kids that are going to be at risk for trafficking, the obesity, job loss. I mean, if you look down the list of negative health markers because of an ACE score over 4, it's extensive. Not only that, our kids in juvenile detention, as I mentioned before, they're generally a 4 or higher. Childhood trauma is the single most devastating health marker that a child can have, and we just don't recognize it. Gosh, if you think what CCSD.
What is it? ACE?
ACE, adverse childhood experience.
I've never heard of this.
Yeah, and I recommend in a quiet place with a nice cup of tea, but you can go and take it. You can just Google it and take it and reflecting back on the time before you were 18. Most of our abusive partners, which is our batterers treatment clients, they take it. Their average ACE score is 7. Our clients' average ACE score is 7 to 11 or 7 to 10. I mean, these things don't happen.
So that's to say they had 7 to 10 childhood traumas.
Yes. Yeah. Like an incarcerated.
And for you, it was 2 in one night.
For me, yeah. For me, and then
probably 3 because you have the divorce in there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm not over 4. Last time I took it, I was at 7, but you realize as you evolve, you also realize, so my experience is different because my trauma happened later in my childhood and it was really one-time trauma. I was not subject to sexual assault on a regular basis. We work with clients for whom rape and sexual assault has been a way of life since they can remember, right? So there are nuances in there, and certainly my ACE situation is much more nuanced because the beginning part of my childhood was very normalized.
So generally speaking, you go on the strip or go to the mall or whatever, everyone around you is walking around with 1.5 on average?
Yes. Yeah, and then those...
So there's people you think that have no childhood trauma? There has to be, right?
No, there are some folks for whom, it's self-identifying, but there are some folks for whom...
Meaning what? Like, so...
Because you take it for yourself, right? So
maybe I felt it might be somebody else would call it trauma. I have a different tolerance.
Well, and also, particularly women, we tend to minimize, right? So, one of the markers is did you have an incarcerated parent, right? Or incarcerated family member? We might say, well, they were only in jail for a little bit before trial, right? Like that doesn't really count. So
Gotcha.
people minimize, but there are some people for whom they have no adverse childhood experiences.
So you mentioned it earlier. You also posted it on as a personal update on SafeNest YouTube. You have a health journey that you're on.
So out of nowhere, last March, I was diagnosed with cancer in the form of leukemia. And I was flabbergasted. I felt fine. I was running. I was doing all the normal things that I do. And I went in for a routine blood test and on a Wednesday, and on Friday, my doctor called me and said, you need to go check in at the emergency room. And I was in the hospital for 40 days. Then I was out for a week.
40.
40. And I was out for a week and a half, and then I was back in for another 30 days.
Here in town?
Mm-hmm. And then on rounds of chemo until I eventually had a bone marrow transplant in October. And I did that at USC.
This might be a dumb question. How does a bone marrow transplant work?
It's not dumb. I wouldn't have known a year ago.
You hear the bone marrow. Oh, okay.
So,
but what is that?
First of all, huge thank you to everybody that puts a sample into the bone marrow database, because I'm here today because a 26-year-old in Germany put a sample in and was a 12 out of 12 genetic match with me. So know that these things it's a community. But a bone marrow transplant is actually really simple. They harvest white blood cells from a donor, and then they put those, so they kill everything in me. So that's the hard part. You have rounds of chemo, radiation, and more rounds of chemo, and then you have basically no bone marrow left. And then they, through a port, put bone marrow, white blood cells into you, and your body regrows the bone marrow. And then they consistently over the first year continue to test you to make sure the cancer doesn't come back. So it's not like there's no surgery or anything, but because they killed all your bone marrow, the recovery is really, it's taxing. Yeah.
So you're just over a year into this.
I'm 6 months. 6 months post-transplant.
Okay.
Yeah.
A year since you found out.
A year since I
found out. A little more than a year. And then 6 months post-transplant. And what are they saying the recovery is?
So, it's not really linear,
There's not like a full recovery kind of a thing?
After a year, if there's no signs of the cancer coming back, you're considered in remission. And then after 5 years, if the cancer hasn't returned, you're considered recovered. So,
wow.
Yeah. So far, knock on wood, everything's been good, and there's no signs that the cancer has come back, and I keep the test to make sure the cancer hasn't come back is they take a piece of bone out of my back. So I'll have that done again later this month, and then another one in October, and hopefully they're clean, and this journey can continue.
When do you get to run? Is it how you feel physically?
How I feel. Yeah. So there's a couple things. All of the radiation and chemo can affect your heart. So before they clear you to go run, you have to have a cardiology, a pulmonary test. So I'll be doing that at the end of this month as well.
You guys have a run, don't you? A fundraiser?
We do in October, our SafeNest 5K.
There's a chance for you.
There's always a chance. I mean,
I run in all of them? You won, of course.
Why not? I won, and I always win my age group because there's usually no one else in my age group. But I won the first one. I sometimes joke that I set up this whole 5K just for my own ego, so that I can get a trophy every year and feel good about running the 5K. But yeah, it's a great event. And
you win just your age group, or do you actually place?
So the first year when I was super fit, I won one. Only 2 guys beat me.
Mm-hmm.
Then COVID hit, and then I don't know what my excuses is for the other.
What was your 5? Do you remember your 5K time?
It was 20. I want to say 21:02 or something like that. It was close to under 21. I remember that. So
cool.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a beautiful day. That day, the weather was great. So it is great. But we do that.
If you run in October, I'll run with you.
Fantastic. Yeah, and what's great about that event is survivors come out, and it's really a celebration of everything you've been through. And just come out, walk a 5K, bring your dog. It supports our pet program.
Where is it?
It's at Bark Bunker Basin. It's over near Centennial Hills. Yeah. Yeah, it's 2 loops around the park. It's super fun.
All right. So Safe Nest has a mission.
We do.
It's to provide comprehensive, collaborative, innovative services for everyone affected by domestic violence, sexual abuse, and human trafficking, while passionately working to end this shared epidemic. I get the sense that these aren't just words that were put together, that
No.
every one of these things means something.
Yeah, anyone that's ever been through a mission building exercise knows that it's like you're really thinking about every element of that statement. So yes.
So let's break these down.
Yeah.
Comprehensive, collaborative, and innovative. Where do those show up in real life?
Yeah. So comprehensive, I mentioned before, we provide over 170,000 170,000 services a year. Those really fall into 3 major categories. So when we talk comprehensive, what we're talking about is preventing domestic and sexual violence, because my goodness, if we could get in front of that, then the rest of my work would be easy. But then we talk about protection, which is the space most people think of domestic and sexual violence agencies. That's hotline, shelter. But for us, where that starts to overlap with some of the innovation is like we go out on calls with Metro. And the reason we do that is because 86% of women in the year before they're murdered will have a police interaction, but only 4% of women the year before they're murdered will call a hotline like SafeNest. So
tell me the stats again.
Yep. So 86% of women who in the 12 months before they're murdered in domestic violence will have an intersectionality with police. But only 4%, like a 911 call to your house, right?
And so now the police is there, the 2 parties are there, the abuser, the victim. Yep. So that's the interaction.
Yep.
So that's 87%.
86%.
86.
But only 4% of victims of homicide before they're in the 12 months before they're murdered will call a hotline like SafeNest hotline. So
what do you make of that?
Well, first of all, it's frustrating because you never know how your marketing dollars are working. In that space, they're not working. But here's what I know about
you think
survivors.
It's marketing?
No.
I think it's human nature. It's a wiring, no?
What we know about survivors, particularly as they're ramping up to homicide, right? There are markers in that ramp up, is things are getting harder and harder and harder for you, and you're working in a more and more and more fearful space. So your ability to call us is incredibly limited. But also, you may have already had an intersection with the system, and it wasn't positive. And so why am I going to call a hotline? What's a hotline going to be able to do for me?
If the cop couldn't help me, why would the hotline help me?
And so we also minimize, right? We're trying to work it out. We're minimizing. And oftentimes survivors don't realize they're in lethal danger, right? So if there's a gun in the home, your chances of being murdered by your domestic violence partner are 500% higher than your partner your another survivor in the space who there is no gun in the home. But if you are being choked or strangled or anyway having your airway blocked, your chances of being murdered are 750% higher, right? And so
that's more than a gun.
More than a gun. Strangulation, because of the intimate nature, right? You think about it, strangling someone is incredibly intense. It's emotional. It's very visceral. It's very close. There is also a documented link between strangulation of a domestic violence victim and cop killers and mass shooters. So when we talk about strangulation, we aren't just talking about, right, strangulation as it relates to domestic violence lethality. We're talking strangulation as it relates to community safety. And so when we talk about innovative, it's bringing that information and putting it down into bite-sized chunks so we can train law enforcement, we can train people on the scene, we can train staff. We're working with the forensic nurses. How can we get subdermal cameras on the scene of 911 calls so that we can better capture this? Those are all the kinds of things in our innovative space. While we work in that protection bucket, we are pushing and pushing and pushing for better response. And not that anybody isn't working hard. We have a phenomenal relationship with Metro, the officers on the scene and the detectives and everybody wants something different or something dramatic to happen. But what SafeNest can bring is we really understand the data. We live in this world every day. We are not distracted by, homelessness is up. That's horrible, but that's not our lane. So we're able to dedicate 100% of our resources in the space in which we work, which then makes us the experts to help elevate everybody else. And we take that responsibility really seriously. So comprehensive for us is prevention, protection, and then empowerment. And empowerment is often a space that domestic violence agencies don't have the luxury to work in because of the funding and working with a client for years can be really hard and very taxing on the resources of an agency. But we're able to do long-term mental health services for both survivors, but also for abusive partners. But we're also able to provide long-term case management. So survivors with complex cases where they're working through a visa, like if they're undocumented, but they're working through a visa to stay in this country because of their domestic violence, those take years. And so we're able to work in that empowerment space long after that critical need is taken care of. So we take the comprehensive and innovative parts of our work very seriously.
So that's the comprehensive, collaborative, innovative.
Yeah.
The next set are domestic violence, sexual abuse, and human trafficking.
Yes.
These are not one and the same.
They're not, but
probably,
they are.
Probably overlap.
So domestic violence is really a very large umbrella. 80% of sexual assault victims know their abuser. And most of the time that's relational or family, relational, romantic or family. The same is true in sex trafficking. Oftentimes we think of sex trafficking in the way that Hollywood portrays it, which is like a gorilla pimp. And then not to glorify that language, that is a criminal. And then he or she has an entourage of women for whom don't really want to be there. And they put them out on the street and they have to turn tricks, to use the street language, and then they're chained up back to a bed in a room somewhere, right? Is not at all what sex trafficking looks like. What sex trafficking looks like is I'm 15, I'm in the foster care system. The first person that ever has paid attention to me as a girl or a woman, right, is taking me out to dinner. They take me out to dinner and then they say, well, I have to help earn for this relationship. They love me. They've just given me new shoes or a new jacket or jewelry or something. They love me. But in order for this relationship to work, I've got to do my part. Drop me off at the corner of Tropicana and pick a side street and somebody's watching them. And that's what trafficking looks like. That's most of what our arrests look like. We're not going into the casinos and doing large busts at the Bellagio or whatever's happening there. 80%.
When you say we, you mean?
I mean Metro. I mean just in general as a society.
Okay.
We're not looking. That's not. I mean, we do occasionally have not we. Metro occasionally has operations like that, but for the most part, sex trafficking is young women and young men who have gotten into relationships because they don't know where else to turn. They don't have access to safe and stable housing. A lot of research to show that the foster care system, unfortunately, is a pipeline into that, right? I don't know what I'm going to do after I'm 18. How do I create a future for myself? And then here comes somebody when I'm 15 or 14 telling me that I can, and I see these other girls dressed up nice, right? Like how do I fight against that?
Yeah.
And so, and those are generally what we call Romeo traffickers. So it's a relationship, but a lot of other trafficking is family trafficking, where you're a member of a family and they're trafficking you. So these all fall under the lens of domestic violence. So while yes, there is sort of that guerrilla domestic violence or sex trafficking going on, it's not the norm. The norm is homegrown and relational.
So then passionately working to end this shared epidemic.
Yes.
What's the passionately working bit, and define epidemic?
Yeah. So actually, I don't have to define epidemic. The World Health Organization declared domestic and sexual violence epidemics against women in 2017. So we're just following on their language. It's an epidemic. The rates in which this is happening are much higher than the rates of which COVID happened. This is an epidemic. We are almost...
That's staggering to think about.
Yeah. We're almost at a threshold of epidemic in terms of homicides, right? When we think about our per capita homicides here.
Is there a number that makes it an epidemic versus versus not? Or how does that?
We generally, that's a great question. I don't know. But because the World Health Organization said it's an epidemic, we're like, yep, we're going to use that language because let's really talk about this in the context. 43.5% of our community is affected by domestic violence. We're the second highest rate in the country. That feels like an epidemic to me.
Unpack that number.
So
what does that mean?
43.5% of the people walking around, you go to a Raiders game, you go anywhere, almost half that population has been affected by domestic violence.
Affected is directly and indirectly?
Experienced domestic violence. So experienced it as a victim or as a perpetrator, which oftentimes we want to say those two things are black and white. I will tell you from working in the field, there is a lot of cross victimization there, right? So yes, we generally see this as gendered, like it's a male perpetrator and a female victim. 30% of our arrests last year were female perpetrators. So this is a very complicated space in terms of how do we identify a perpetrator, how do we identify a victim, but 43.5% of our population is affected by domestic violence. If 43.5% of us were walking around with chickenpox or measles or whatever the case may be, something very visual, we would all be staying home. Schools would be closed. We'd be masked up from here to eternity in hazmat suits. But we don't see domestic violence.
Right.
So that's the epidemic. And
you don't see it. You don't really hear it because it's a shameful thing, potentially.
Yeah. And I think you can hear the passion in my voice. A lot of times the passionate comes out in our legislative work because we're educating constantly. Like there are, Safe Nest is a phenomenal organization. We don't hold the purse strings. I mean, we have donors and we have a great business model, but when we can get in front of the legislature and help pass things that are going to impact our clients' lives and make our community safer, we're very passionate about that, for sure.
So Ray Lucero.
Yes.
He was on Takeaways episode 10.
Wow.
So I'm a young agent, I would say newish to the workforce. I'm going and doing the things you're supposed to do, networking. I'm at it was like one of those Vegas Inc. events where they release one of their, I was going to say episodes, one of their magazines, like an edition. It was probably the banker's edition because Ray is a banking executive and I'm at this function. So I'm pretty sure it was like a banking edition that they released. So I'm going around and meeting people. I meet Ray. Immediately changed the way I view the world. After the typical, who are you? What do you do?
Yeah.
Kind of pleasantries. He said something that really surprised me. He said, how can I help you? I was a little taken aback. This is what we talked about in our episode. I was taken aback. What do you mean? What do you mean? What are you talking about? It's like, what are you working on? Who would you like to meet? What can I do to help you? Like that was Ray's lead. And that forever changed me because it made a lot of sense. And I adopted that and I give Ray all the credit. So I bring him in. I just started this podcast. This is like 2018, maybe. I just started this podcast. I'm going to talk about my takeaways from people. The takeaway with Ray was this one, how can I help you? And in that, I think I asked him, it might've been the question, single most influential thing event in your life. And he said, well, my sister died. I'm like, what? I've known him for, at this point, I don't know, maybe 10 years or so. What do you mean? And he tells me the story that she was a victim of domestic abuse and ultimately died. And later on in life, as a way to honor her, he joined the board of Safe Nest and whatnot. So that was one story. Angelica Clemmer now. She was Angelica Marie Lopez when it was Takeaways episode 12.
Wow.
She came and told her story. So she's commercial real estate broker, loving home, grew up in Boulder City. She's doing well.
Yeah.
And meets a attractive guy, very charismatic. He was a professional fighter. And, roses turned to abuse.
Yeah.
And very severe abuse. In my episode with Angelica, she let me do the naive and ignorant thing where I got to ask her all the quote unquote dumb questions that someone might ask. And it was really in the pursuit of being educated. She was a good sport. Like I asked, you're a successful person. How could this happen to you?
Right.
How could something like this happen to you? What did you do to bring this onto yourself? Why would you make him mad or angry at you?
Yeah.
And she was a great sport. Like I said, these are all common questions, natural things that even the victims themselves feel.
Yeah.
I don't want to redo that with you. What I want to do, like you shared some statistics. I want to go through as many as we possibly can. I've got some here. Maybe I'll just lob them to you and you can kind of fact check. You talked about if there's a gun in the home, it's 500% chance of it ending in a homicide. If you've been choked, it's 750%. So Nevada ranks second in the nation for domestic violence.
So there's a couple of different stats that work in that space. So with the 2024 data, Nevada is the second highest rates of domestic violence homicides per capita. Homicides.
Okay.
Clark, we have the second highest rates of domestic violence. That's the 43.5% I referred to earlier.
Okay.
However, Clark County is the most dangerous county in the country for domestic violence homicides per capita. And the city of Las Vegas is the most dangerous city for domestic violence homicides in the country per capita. So,
what do you attribute that to?
So a portion of it is so when you look at places where domestic violence homicides are high, there's a couple of sort of unifiers. One is gun laws. So we have pretty loose and open gun laws. So that makes the accessibility to a firearm, which while choking is a lead indicator for homicide, firearms are 80% the weapon of choice that actually kills a person. So we got a lot of guns. The other is what are the repercussions for a domestic violence abuser? How is our court system doing? Are we really prosecuting these cases? Our strangulation is a felony offense. We are not prosecuting these cases. And that's for a couple of reasons. One is it is not because nobody cares. It's because we have two barriers. One is victims of these heinous crimes oftentimes are back with their abuser. And the big question is why? Well, when we sample our clients that we work with through the DA's office, a lot of it has to do with finances. Domestic violence is the number one pathway to homelessness for women and children. So my abuser's incarcerated. I don't have a way to support my kids. I don't have a way to pay rent. I'm now homeless.
So rather stay in the situation and stay in a home for my kids.
Or have him out of jail and working. So the failure to sort of follow through with that prosecution is our data shows that it's very financially motivated. I think there's also a lot of love and a lot of emotion and a lot of things that happen in these cases. But the reason we're not seeing the high level prosecutions is because our DA won't walk through a prosecution without a victim, right? So those cases get dropped. So there's a lot of cases.
Are there other communities where the DA can walk through the prosecution without the victim?
So it's dicey. So in California, they will do no witness prosecution. The question we haven't gotten answered from California is, okay, well, you can do the first level of the case, but can you take that all the way through to a conviction? Because the Constitution, you have a right to confront your accuser. Right. So there are things happening around the country where we and know that I think our recant and no-show rate, which is the language for victims who don't move forward, is 95%. The national average is 88%. So it's not like something atrocious is happening here, but it is a factor. And the question for me starts to become, as a state, we put millions of dollars into our justice system. Domestic violence is the second highest case number that our courts deal with other than minor traffic violations. We have got to figure out legally, legislatively, as a state, a better way to do this because the justice system, not just in Nevada, across the country, is not equipped to deal with this. So that's one reason why it's so high here. The guns is one reason. The lack of enforcement for domestic violence abusers is the other reason. And part of that, right, is that is a complicated bubble. How do we create financial security? I mean, homelessness is also very high here, right? There's all of these correlating factors to that. So really what we need to do is unpack this piece with survivors and figure out how to tackle it totally differently because what we're doing is not working and we're just wasting a lot of money and resources and time.
So these might be related. SafeNest receives nearly 30,000 crisis calls annually. SafeNest responds to 30 domestic violence cases each week.
On
Those
scene.
are different.
That's on scene with Metro.
Okay.
So yeah. So we have a great partnership with Metro, and when they have a strangulation, a repeat call, or they just want us out there, we do our best to go out on scene.
That's the 30.
That's the 30.
And the 30,000 crisis calls, that's through the hotline?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In 2023, Nevada reported 72 domestic violence homicides.
Yep. 56 in Clark County.
That's what it says here. How'd you know that? In 2024, that number dropped dramatically.
Well, I think first of all, I don't think you can do these things in 2-year increments. We've been tracking our homicide rate since 1996. We have, with the exception of 2 outlier years, our average is the 3rd most dangerous state in the country for women being murdered by men, which is the very common domestic violence marker.
Outlier meaning?
We had 2 years where one year I think we were 11th and one year we were 18th. But the rest of the years, when you average them all together, we were the 3rd most dangerous state in the country for those homicides.
That's what it says here, too. Nevada consistently ranks among the top 10 states for women killed by men.
Yeah.
Did you read this before?
No, I'm sure my marketing team was probably just...
I did my own research.
Oh, you did your own research.
But it's probably researched on your...
Yeah, those are all things that I will have said publicly on the record at the legislature. So
Southern Nevada has limited shelter capacity for survivors.
Yes. So we have, give or take, 100+ beds, and then Safe House, which is the only other confidential provider in the state, they seem to vacillate between 30 to 70 beds. I think just kind of depending on the makeup of of who's in shelter at the moment. That's so. Give or take, on a good day, we have 170 beds in Clark County, Nevada. Other communities our size, including San Antonio, that we're modeling the Hope campus after, have 400 confidential beds. We are woefully under-resourced.
So we need a double plus, is what you're saying.
We need 400 beds, is what anyone who will listen. Like, if we want to really get into this space where we can help women and men, victims fleeing lethal domestic violence, 400 beds is probably the appropriate number, with room for growth because our city's growing. But the additional piece on that is, for every survivor that wants shelter, for every survivor that we are able to give a bed to, 8 do not get a bed with us because they're not in lethal enough danger. We screen against lethal danger to get into our shelter. So we know Nevada is under-resourced in homeless beds, but we're also under-resourced in this crisis space, which has consequences.
So if someone was going to build you a 100-bed shelter, what would it cost?
400 beds.
I know, but you have 100, right? So
I have 100.
Let's say you're going to get another 100 bed.
If I'm going to get
is the goal to get one shelter that has...
So really...
or is it better to separate them up?
No, great question. So I would like a model like Dallas has in Dallas, Texas. They have 4 shelters kind of on the outskirts of town. They spend a lot of money Ubering, but that's okay, or rideshare. And then they have a centrally located, kind of like we're opening One Safe Place, a centrally located facility. This works out really well because right now we have the one shelter and Safe House has the one shelter. And if a client is in my neighborhood, housing them at our shelter is problematic, and Safe House doesn't always have space. We do have a small shelter up in Mesquite, so we end up using that as an annex when we need to for clients down here. But the model for Las Vegas should be 4 individual shelters in the quadrants of the city. They can be on the outskirts or, and then we are just using, we're partnering with Uber or Lyft to make sure that we can get people where they need to go. That works really well because we can build these sort of like, Nevada Hand does such beautiful construction. If we can build these beautiful sort of units, then great. And they need to be private units.
How much land do you need for a 100-bed shelter? We
can do it in, I think the last time I looked, it's like we can do a 100-bed shelter in an acre. I mean, depending on how high the city ordinance is for building, right? If it's only 2 stories, then I'm going to need a little more space. But it's like a hotel.
There's also, so that's what I should picture as a hotel?
Yeah, like a Holiday Inn. Or the hotels by the stadium, 2 stories, kind of compressed. That's really what we need. We need 4 of those around the city. They need to blend into the environment because hidden in plain sight is really what we go for. And then they need to be private rooms. That's something I think society is catching up to. But I I had a college roommate and we fought like cats and dogs. Neither one of us was dealing with a domestic violence relationship. We put these poor survivors coming in with kiddos in a communal space, and we do our best to fill it with as much dignity as possible. But my goodness, it would be so much easier if folks could just be in their own room. 90% of what my advocates spend time on is roommate conflict. Window open, window closed. How high is the thermostat? Who's using the bathroom? It's
that's
all
tough.
the stuff. Yeah, and you're dealing with people at different stages of their trauma recovery, so it is tough. It's really tough.
SafeNest spends $30,000 to $70,000 monthly on hotel rooms to house survivors.
So that money ran out, so we haven't done that in a while. But I do like to share with people that between Formula One and the Super Bowl last year, we spent $350,000 on hotel rooms. Because
you did.
We did. Because of the outcry.
The pricing went up.
A lot of that was trafficking. Well, what was happening,
okay.
Right? So folks that are being trafficked, you generally don't identify as like, oh, I'm a traffic victim, because you give away all your power. But you're in a situation you don't like and in a relationship that you no longer want to be part of. And so you're not going to call Metro and be like, I'm being trafficked. That's not how this works. Your Metro may do, they might find you. They might find you on a corner. They might find you working inappropriately, right? And then there's a police interaction. But for the most part, traffic victims call us or a domestic violence hotline and say, I'm in a relationship I don't want to be in anymore. They talk about the abuse. And it takes a good month to 6 weeks, even longer, for someone that we're working with in therapy at shelter to relay that they were actually being trafficked, right? Because they finally sort of through that mental health support come to that realization. So that $350,000 was because we had an influx of trafficking in the city that we've still failed to recognize.
So these might not be people who live here. They came in for it.
Some are local, but some were brought here from other places.
So you know what's nuts as we were talking about this, and you mentioned Formula One and the Super Bowl. My head is still domestic violence. It didn't even shift. It took a second to shift to now we're talking about trafficking.
Well, and it's trafficking that looks like domestic violence because it's a partner that's trafficking you. And that's where it's like the phrase interpersonal violence is apropos, because really all of these things intersect. Angelica is actually one of the few people I have met in this work that sort of had a solo domestic violence experience. She grew up, as you mentioned, in a loving household. So that adverse childhood experience score is low, right? So she's an anomaly. What we see is folks that grew up in abuse, been abused from a young age in all different kinds of ways, and then it moves into an adult iteration, and a lot of that overlaps with trafficking.
So you mentioned a bit earlier, but lack of forensic nurses is a challenge in prosecuting domestic violence.
Goodness, yes. So
what's a forensic nurse?
Yeah. So in order for you to have evidence of your rape or sexual assault, sexual abuse doesn't always have to be a full rape, or strangulation, you need a forensic nurse exam. And so Clark County has one forensic nurse, Nurse Jerry, who works out of UMC. We have 2.4 million people, 3 million people on a busy weekend. So according to UMC, they're doing 300 plus rape kits a month. I haven't seen any other data to back that up, but we actually have legislation that we're working on with Senator Scheibel now that the issue in Nevada, follow the money. So unfortunately, when they set up forensic nursing, gosh knows how long ago, they set it up so that a county whoever the licensed provider is has to bill the county, and the county has to bill the state, but you can only bill up to $10,000 a year. So I do not say this lightly, but really, what are we doing January 3rd, right? We have rape here. We have strangulation here. We have no financial mechanism for these exams to be being paid for. So it's not really that UMC's at fault or the commissioners for not putting more resources here, although I wish they were more on top of it. It's that the billing mechanism was broken. So the legislation we have going through is to fix that. It would allow forensic nurses working out of medical facilities to bill the state directly and solve this issue. And the state, then the $10,000 governor on that is gone. So that's the hope. But I am not a nurse. I am not involved in the medical field. And I'm incredibly frustrated that SafeNest has to, I'm happy to carry the mantle. That's what we do. We elevate the movement. But where have we been for 30 years, Clark County? I mean, honestly, who ever thought one forensic nurse was good? Like, okay, when we were 200,000 people. But
is there a number that we need? Kind of like you have a supply demand on the beds.
So it's hard to say because of the variability, right? So when we're having large events, we need more nurses, right? The better question is, what's the wait time that's appropriate for someone who's just been raped to get a rape kit? Because it's probably not 18 hours, which is what we're seeing now, right? It's so.
Oh my God.
I would
I
say,
can't imagine like the
and you can't shower,
agony
you
of,
can't eat, you can't drink.
oh,
And so really what I would say is we need to staff this so that the wait time is less than an hour. And we need to staff this so that Dignity Health isn't putting a rape victim in a Uber and sending them to UMC. And we need to staff this in a way that we are proud of how we are and helping and healing from the moment that they get into contact with either the police or a forensic nurse or whatever that looks like. And we are not doing that now. We are re-traumatizing people.
What makes a forensic nurse?
There's a license, a forensic nurse license. So we have there's a phenomenal program at UNLV that trains and licenses forensic nurses so that they have that.
And there's literally one in town?
We have 26 forensic nurses in town.
Okay.
We have one nurse in town that's able to actually carry out exams for the DA's office for evidence.
Okay, that's a problem, right?
So a lot of this stuff in Nevada is like no one's sitting around twiddling
What's
their mustache.
the process to ordain the other 20 some odd nurses?
It's really fixing this legislation so these nurses
so that's in play?
Can bill. SB 87, it's already had its Senate hearing, and hopefully it'll be moving to the Assembly in the next couple weeks.
This is insane. An abuser will have, on average, 3 to 7 victims.
So that came out of a study that the AG's office did in 2019 for really specifically for the state of Nevada. And what we were looking at was if a survivor. So this is why I tell my sister agencies all the time, like a survivor leaving domestic violence has left a vacancy for a new survivor to be created. And so I wanted a number on, what does that look like? And so the study showed 3 to 7 in their lifetime.
And this also goes back to the ability to prosecute.
Correct. Right. And so if we started looking at domestic violence from the abuser lens and less on the victim lens, because what courts do is, was it bad enough? How were you really abused? Why didn't you leave? Right? You had all these things available to you. What we really need to start doing is looking on the abuser side and questioning the abuser in a much more visceral way, which I want to say the courts are on top of, like the changing dynamics and the way prosecutions work. And so is the county. It's just, everything moves at its own pace.
Even that little observation around looking at it differently, like the questions, the stupid, naive questions I got to ask Angelica. It's like, I wouldn't even think to look at the abuser.
Right. Because we assume innocent, right, until proven guilty. But in the space of domestic violence and rape, what that does is take the person who is already traumatized. And I'll say the misreporting for domestic violence and rape varies between 2 and 8%. And that stat comes from a website that is very abuser friendly. So take it as you will, but that's the only stat I can find for false reporting. But yet we treat every domestic violence victim in Nevada and every sexual assault victim, not intentionally, but it is the process, as if they're false reporting, right?
There's a lot of here. It's like it's not a blame. No, we're not doing blame here. No. We're understanding. This is what I'm getting from this.
Correct.
And just like you talked about that in the 70s where the husband and wife are on the lawn and no one's doing anything, that was kind of how it was. Yeah. I imagine that's a husband and wife issue. I mean, you didn't think he was going to take out a knife and stab her, but okay. Even that, it's like, well, it's between a husband. What's that?
You didn't step in. That was the culture of the time.
And now it's like the partnering up with Metro to be on the scene, to look at it differently. Educating officers in a deeper level to notice things that they wouldn't notice if they weren't educated. I mean, that's understandable.
Yeah.
Now I'm curious, like when you're out and about, can you just spot dynamics?
It's hard to know whether or not my radar is right because, of course, I'm only seeing people for a few seconds. I know, I'll give you an example, right? So everybody saw Travis Kelce like get angry at his coach. And then everybody's like, all the
concern for Taylor Swift
domestic
immediately.
violent movement blows up. So I was like, okay, hang on a sec, right? That's not really what this looks like. And that I had no look, I hope
your radar didn't go off.
My radar did not go off, right? And you never know what's happening behind closed doors. But I will ask you, and I ask folks this all the time, how many times do we see the nice little neighbor on the lawn going, he was the nicest guy, he just murdered his entire family? We see that all the time. So to believe that I somehow have any better radar, I am attuned to like the language that people use towards each other. That because I get, I'm not offended, but my radar goes off when I hear an adult male refer to his adult partner as a girl. Like, that's creepy to me. So there are things that like I just go, But the only time I ever involved myself as a bystander was I was driving down Sahara on the east side of town, and there was a couple with a baby in a pram, and they were really
pram. There's your British
pram.
coming
there
out.
You go.
Stroller?
A push chair. Stroller. There we go. I'll get there.
I know pram because my wife's family, South African.
Okay. Yeah.
They called it a pram. Like, what is a pram? What are you guys talking about?
Yeah.
Sorry, keep going.
I know. So they were pushing this little baby. It was hot out and they were really fighting. And I was driving by in my car and I just caught it out of the glimpse of my eye. So I circled round and I asked for directions to try and diffuse, right? Like it was this, lady asking for directions. And then as I got out of the car and was chatting with them, I handed the female in the relationship we have these little, we call them spa cards. They kind of fit in the palm of your hand. I just handed her one and said, if you guys ever need anything, and then I drove off. That's the only time I've ever gotten involved outside because, to be fair to society, we all have bad days. One time I was at the grocery store and my daughter was younger acting out and I yelled at her and I'm like, gosh, if somebody caught that moment on tape, right? Like not my best moment, but it doesn't mean I'm a horrible mother or a horrible person. So I try to give people the benefit and just where my heart always goes is I want to make sure there's information everywhere somebody would look to get the resources they need.
So in public restrooms, in the stalls, so when you close the door, is that your sign? Are those your signs?
No, actually, it's interesting. Only 200, and I think the number was 216 people called that number last year in Nevada.
You know what I'm talking about? In hotel rooms.
Yeah.
In the public restrooms, when you close the door to the stall, it says if you need help, if you're a victim of.
So there's a couple of them that I really like. In the bars, they have one that says if you need help, ask for an angel shot at the bar, and they'll get you help. And it's really incognito. I love that because what that poster does is it really explains for you what's going to happen, which is really what people need, right? So when we're working with domestic violence survivors, they feel like they have some control over their environment, right? And so what I can't do is like the numbers at the airport, which I appreciate that they're there, but what I would love for them to say is, if you call this number, we have help and resources for you. We have, 3 months in a shelter, workforce development, because I don't know what's going to happen when I call that number. Are 2 men with white hazmat suits coming? Is a van coming? Like, what's happening? I don't know what that number provides. So I wish they had a little bit more information.
What does the angel one say?
The angel one says, go, if you are in a situation in which you are uncomfortable, go to the bar and ask for an angel shot, and we will organize for you a safe, discreet exit and transportation, right? And so it just lays out like, okay, I can comprehend what's going to happen. And that's what we need to think about when we're thinking about survivor and survival mindset is, where am I getting fed tonight? Where am I sleeping tonight? Are my family safe? Like, there's a lot of things that go into, like, when we say to a survivor, we'll just leave. And you're going, hang on a second, because the most dangerous time for a survivor is as they're preparing to leave, or the 3 to 12 months after they've left. That's when women are murdered in domestic violence, right? So slow your roll a little bit. Let's talk about what's available. And that's why we push on our hotline safety planning, figuring out what that looks like for you. We do not We want to lay out the options for you and have you make the choice. And so those signs on the back and in the hotel room are great, but
it's a good idea that needs to be refined.
Just add some language or put a cue.
Like, when you call, here's what will happen.
Yeah. Just so I know that I'm safe for at least, especially if you're being trafficked. Okay, but where am I sleeping tonight?
Mm-hmm.
Right? You got to give me a little bit more information than that if you're expecting me to sort of take a leap and call this number.
That's interesting. So the person who wrote the sign assumes that you just know, well, oh no, this is what we do.
Right.
But the person sitting there has no clue.
Yeah. So if we changed it, just added some language, that's all. Just to help give a little bit more information. And that's, I haven't done any focus groups with trafficking survivors. That's my Liz Opinion 101. But
makes sense.
But I do just feel like if we want people to make these decisions, we just have to provide them with more information, because come at it from a survivor's lens. Like, he's waiting outside the door. I just got here from wherever, if I'm at the airport, right? From Minnesota or who knows. I don't know where I am. I don't have my ID. He's got my wallet. I probably don't have my phone, by the way. How can we make this better work for the survivor in reality?
Good segue into your services. 24/7 crisis hotline, emergency shelter, counseling, court support, advocacy, abusive partners. So you have services for the abuser.
We do.
That one surprised me. Let's start there, and then you could tell me about any of these other ones you want to tell me about.
So as I mentioned before, right? So for us, our data shows 63% of our victims are going back to their abuser. At least once. 63%.
3%.
The national, the studies, they're not a really comprehensive study, but you see between 50 and 70% return rate from at least once, if not permanently, in the domestic violence movement. So here's what I say, right? Like, as I shared, I was diagnosed with cancer. In 1970s, Nixon made cancer a health priority, war on cancer, or whatever his language was. At no point did he say, hey, look, we're not going to do anything about the tumor or why the cancer happened, and just deal with your symptoms and hope you don't die from the cancer, which is exactly how we deal with domestic violence. We don't at all talk about the root or what's actually causing the domestic violence. We just talk about the symptoms, because a survivor is a symptom of someone else's problem, someone else's rage. So abusive partner programming is designed to get at, for lack of a better metaphor, the tumor, right? Let's get at the cancer and let's eradicate what's making it so dangerous for that survivor. And so our abusive partner program consists of court-mandated classes, but also voluntary classes. And as we expand out into our new facility, we will actually have abusive partner case management and advocacy, because abusive partners need a lot of the same support survivors need. And many of them, if we change our language, are victims from childhood. And for them, it's manifesting as aggressive and abusive tendencies. For survivors, it's manifesting as a survivor in a bad relationship, right? So how do we fix domestic violence? First, we work with kids, but secondarily, we have to work with abusive partners, because otherwise that survivor whom, leaves, hopefully, or goes back, is either going back into an unsafe situation, or there's a vacancy for a new survivor to be created. So if we're going to truly end domestic and sexual violence, which is the hope, we have to work with the abusers.
Do you believe it can end?
I believe we can I believe we can get our homicide rate down to less than 6 a year, from 42, whatever we're at this year, to 6 or lower. I believe that if we truly want it to end, the monumental investment will be in youth, and in the school district, because you break a cycle when kiddos that are apt to repeat that cycle are young. It's much more difficult for me to be working with a 50-year-old man who grew up in abuse, has been abusive to his wife for the last 20 years, and is now in court-mandated classes to see that he's being abusive. That is a much higher lift.
He doesn't even know he's being abusive.
Right. But if we're talking to young people about what does abuse look like, what can we all expect as dignity in relationships? What does partnership look like? It doesn't have to have anything to do with sex or intimate relationships. It has to do with how do we treat each other.
Any other Any others that you want to highlight? The crisis hotline, emergency shelter, counseling, court support, advocacy.
I mean, we're in 11 locations. So we, of course, have our main campus and then our residential campus, both here and in Mesquite. But then, what we've really done is try to build an agency that's intersecting where clients are. And that's why we've got so many services, because we're in so many places.
So let's talk about your achievements. Madam CEO. So since 2017, there have been 60,000 survivors. 2017, there's been 60,000 survivors served.
Mm-hmm.
Launch of PS 417 response program in collaboration with Las Vegas Metro. You talked about that. Yep. So that enables advocates to accompany police officers. What does that look like? What does that actually look like?
Yeah, so Metro gets on scene.
And we had to have a law for this?
No.
What is PS 417?
That's our name for the program. Project Safe 417. 417 is the Metro code for a DV call. So
DV is domestic violence. Violence. I know.
There you go. Now you've got all the vernacular. So
I don't think I have all the vernacular, but I'm trying.
Ready to go. So Metro gets on scene. They recognize, so Metro has about 70,000 domestic violence 911 calls a year. Only 30% of those are result in an arrest or probable cause for an arrest. We get called out on any that have signs of strangulation, repeat calls to the same household, or if Metro just feels like it'd be a benefit for us to be on scene. So they get there. They give us a call. We're out. We have a whole dispatch software built off of third world country 911 software. It's phenomenal. It's like no telephones needed. It's all just great. And I can track cars and I can do all this stuff. But yeah, then we are on scene within about 20, 25 minutes. And Metro's guarantee with us is that they'll stay on scene while we're providing advocacy. So we meet with the client and start doing what we do. We can issue emergency temporary protection orders on scene. We can do shelter screenings. Whatever the survivor needs, the most important thing, though, is that they can get connected with us. And what that does is for Metro, it reduces the repeat phone calls to those addresses. It lowers the risk of homicide. And then it creates a safety net for that survivor. They know what's available to them.
You helped pass AB 257 in 2023.
That was so funny. I always remember these codes. That was a strangulation bill. So that was $2 million in funding for strangulation exams so that we could now this session open up the floodgates so we can have more forensic nurses doing those exams, and there's money at the state level for those exams to be reimbursed.
And what's the camera you talked about for this?
Yeah, so Indiana's piloting this, so I'm watching them. It's a subdermal camera that police can take on scene. So 50% of strangulation is not visible to the naked eye, even lethal strangulation. Right?
Seriously?
Mm-hmm.
What is it, bruise after?
Yeah, it's subdermal. So it, for whatever reason, doesn't show up on like you and I couldn't see it. So you need a subdermal camera.
Dermal like skin.
And so, particularly when you think about different skin tones, it can be harder to detect even if there was bruising showing. So these cameras go under, like they take a regular picture, like the survivor doesn't have to do anything, but they penetrate the surface of the skin to show bruise marks and pressure points. And so they can be, the survivor can still go in for a strangulation exam because there's a lot of delicate bones in your neck that we want to make sure you're okay, but it documents that strangulation on scene. So I don't know.
Do you guys have any of these cameras?
No, I don't know if there will be any funding under the national.
How much is one of these cameras?
I don't know. We're on the precipice of examining it, but my goodness, it'd be phenomenal.
I'm curious, like, what do these things look like? What do they cost?
Yeah, and that's also a conversation I had with the coroner a couple weeks ago is, can we do strangulation exams on every homicide victim that comes through? Because even if they're a gunshot wound, if we could start to understand, even if I'm drug overdose, if we can start to see the correlation between like how many people that are murdered in homicide have strangulation, we can start to understand it better.
Is it a function that this is just too early for you guys really to jump in? Is it the funding not a funding priority at this point?
Part of it is fixing the forensic nursing piece first, because if we can, so we've been working with Metro for quite a while now on the strangulation questionnaire, the things they're asking in the field, all those kinds of things. But now the blockage is getting clients to get us an exam, survivors to get an exam. So that's sort of like, we got to eat the elephant one bite at a time. So that's now the exam.
Exam meaning like go to a hospital and get
currently it would
or
be
wherever.
Go only to UMC, but
go to UMC and get you. I'm trying to understand
that's
it.
Okay.
So, you have a program where your team goes out with Metro. You're in the home. You're talking to the victim.
Yeah.
If you had one of these cameras, could you not do it right then and there?
We could at least get a subdermal picture, yes, and that would be very helpful.
Is it like I'm picturing like it's a camera kind of a thing, or is this like a machine?
Kind of like any of the cameras that are in here, and it's got like a very.
So this is totally something that your team can carry with you to the field.
Yeah, and we would actually prefer Metro carry it because when it comes to prosecution, Metro is a much more neutral, like. Not that we would ever lie, but Metro is a neutral body.
For the evidence, like if Metro's administering it, here's the result. It's not like you guys are looking to put people away sort of a thing. I got it.
Right. So, and so it's just
so much little like things to consider.
I know. Well, the world is complicated.
Well, that might be the title of the show. The world is complicated.
Just when you think you've got it figured out.
Here's what I'm saying. There's probably a donor out there that says if they're some reasonable number, like I'll give you the money for 10 of these things and pilot it here too. Why does Indiana get to pilot all the fun stuff? Yeah.
So absolutely. And I will, I would say, it would probably be a commitment about $250,000 from a donor to get probably 3 or 4 of them.
These are expensive.
They're expensive because the technology is still new, but I will get firmer numbers. If a donor is interested in funding that, they can certainly reach out to me and then we'll get a cleaner number. But I think it's an incredible opportunity for us. This is where the innovation comes in. Getting everybody to a strangulation exam, even if we had 26 nurses up and activated, is still, if I have kiddos,
there's no way.
I have work.
There's what's the likelihood of a victim leaving the home, going to UMC?
Right.
Stop everything and go there. I mean, they really have to be in bad shape.
They would have to be, they have to be medical distress. Usually rape is a little bit more like, yes, I want to get the evidence and also make sure I'm okay. Strangulation, so typically a victim does not call 911 on a strangulation until they've been strangled 5 or 6 times. And most people are not walking around.
That's insane.
Understanding that the traumatic brain injury, particularly if you're being strangled and your head which is a common, like you just think about the logistics of a strangulation, the traumatic brain injury is also a really big factor. And so we have clients who cannot tell a linear story. They can't remember the abusive incident, right? And so there's a lot that goes into the strangulation that if we could get cameras on scene, I think that would be a phenomenal starting point for moving things in the right direction.
Here's the next one. Secured $9 million in historic funding from the state. The largest one-time investment in the state's history to bring to life One Safe Place. That was in June of 2024. What is One Safe Place?
Thanks for asking. So it is a campus on the corner of Meadows and Valley View where our administrative building has been located for since 2017. We've purchased 3 other buildings. We now own all of the buildings on that corner, and we will have a full survivor resource center, which will include collaborative agencies as well. So those folks doing work similar to SafeNest or adjacent to SafeNest that have services that survivors need will be housed on site. 100% the idea. Survivor comes into that facility for support and their needs are met. They have wraparound services there.
This is like the Mayo Clinic for survivors.
Correct. And this model has been in the country since 2003. And in communities where these have opened, the homicide rate has come down. And almost never, according to the founder, is someone who seeks services at a One Safe Place facility murdered. So this is a really great answer for our community. It's not the only answer, but it certainly is an opportunity. Yeah. And, as a survivor, I can walk in and we have a child watch program. So kiddos can be put into it's like not a licensed daycare, but enough for you to do your counseling appointment or get your temporary protection order, whatever it is you need. So the idea is you walk in, feel like it's a place you can heal. The other thing that we see in these facilities around the country is prosecutions go up. As I mentioned before, in our county, a lot of the prosecutions are recant or no-show because I don't know what's available for me to survive without the breadwinner. Coming into One Safe Place, you'll be able to see all the resources that are available to you. So it's phenomenal. I can't thank the governor's office and the heads of interim finance committee, Danielle Monroe-Moreno and Marilyn Dondero Loop, enough for pushing for this project to get funded. And then also they assisted us in getting the infrastructure bank loan from the state, which is a very low interest loan, so that we could purchase all of the buildings.
So for a nonprofit like you, what does it mean to be in control of your real estate?
So the first big thing is very tangible. So the first building we purchased as the money was coming in was the building that we've been in since 2017, which we were paying $20,000 a month for rent for. And so all of a sudden now I don't have that overhead. So there's more money that can go into clients.
What overhead? It doesn't go away totally. You have,
well,
you don't pay taxes, right?
We don't pay taxes. So we have utilities and things like that.
But you're paying that anyway in a CAM.
Correct. So there's $20,000 to the bottom line. For now we own the building, right? We bought the building next door, which was a church, which we're turning into an event center and a workforce development program. We'd been spending $20,000 a year on space to get staff together for all staff meetings, so we didn't have a big enough meeting room. That's solved. But we also now have a place where other nonprofits can come in and run events. And then we also can do trainings, all kinds of things. So that's very alleviating.
And so for you as the executive, when you're creating a budget, you don't have to fundraise for that.
Correct, because it should self-fund, right? And then the Survivor Resource Center will, because of the other tenants that are there, that are most of them, there's 4 tenants, 3 of them are already folks that we refer to and work with. They'll be paying rent, and we have other space to generate rental income, which will be in line with the services that we're providing there. Now I have a sustainable business plan, which is why the infrastructure bank loan was approved, because there's a plan.
What is the infrastructure bank loan?
So the state smartly, I think this was Zach Conine's baby, but put together, I don't know how many assets that the infrastructure bank has, but put it all together and said, look, nonprofits, businesses, if you need a low interest loan and it's behoove the state, like it's doing a benefit for the state, you can apply for an infrastructure bank loan. And the interest rate is much, much lower than the market interest rate. And so, we will be fundraising to pay the loan off, but that loan allowed us to do all of this great work. And so the infrastructure bank approved the business plan, because even if I didn't raise $1, we can meet the covenants of the loan. Now it's a stretch, and I'd much rather fundraise and pay off the loan if there's any donors out there that would love to help with that, because then I can use the rental income for operational overhead, but also then to increase client services. So this is, I got my roots in the nonprofit world at Girl Scouts. I love the cookie sale, because the cookie sale is the single best business entity in the nonprofit world. It's an $800 million business nationwide, right? This is young girls learning financial literacy and all the great skills that it teaches, but it also is a sustainability module for the Girl Scouts. Like, this is how you survive. You build a business model. And all of my my work in my MBA, whenever I could do a project, was always about building revenue structures in nonprofits, because that is the best way to do it.
It takes it from I don't want to say a drain, but when I say drain, I mean, without this One Safe Place and a revenue streams coming in and the other things that you're doing, you as the executive and your fundraising team every year have to raise 100% of your expenses, including your real estate expenses, staff expenses, and then the services, which ideally you're raising all this money. And is it ever 100% going out? I don't know, but like as much as possible is actually going to the mission.
Yes.
So having control of your real estate allows you to do that puts you certainly in a much better position.
Absolutely. And,
and then the Mayo Clinic thing, like,
yeah,
as I'm getting a little up there in age, not like that I'm super old, but as I am getting older and health is becoming more and more of a top of mind thing, and other people, I've never been to the Mayo Clinic, but I'm at the age now where I have to do typical health screening stuff routinely. And people that do go there, it's like the thing that they appreciate the most about it. You go to one place, you spend the time, and everything is there.
Yes.
Top floor, this floor, everything's connected. So as the patient, the experience is there's nothing better, as opposed to you could do all those things here.
Yeah.
But you're going from one office to another. You need a referral from one doctor to the other. It's 2 weeks between just getting yourself to an appointment, but then you have to get the appointment in order to get into their system to then have the service that you want to get.
Yep.
And that's just on that like preventative health thing.
Right.
This is, in some cases, I imagine life and death. And I can't imagine you show up, you muster the courage to get help. And then they say, okay, well, now tomorrow, go and file for a TPO somewhere you've never been.
Right.
And who knows who's there or what's there. And then after that, I mean, it's absurd.
It's absurd.
So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm incredibly excited to get the ball rolling, and we have a great group of partner agencies at the table on the steering committee. So this will be life-changing for our community. So we're excited.
That's awesome. Is that's not the same as Camp Hope?
No.
What is Camp Hope?
We've been running Camp Hope since I think 2018. And Camp Hope is, this year we're taking 100 kiddos. We normally take between 100 and 120 kids. 100% of the kids that we take to camp have been affected by domestic and some also sexual violence. And the idea of Camp Hope, again, it's a model that it's a national model. I don't know how many camps they have, but we're running the Southern Nevada portion of that. And the idea is pretty simple, but also revolutionary. Kids get a normal camp experience to get their childhood back, because many kids growing up in domestic violence, they haven't had that. And so it's camp. But there are 2 activities every day built in to help kids vision beyond their circumstances, right? And so this is all, again, data backed up by evidence through actually University of Oklahoma that runs a Hope Lab. And so the idea is if I can raise your Hope score, which we measure, then your chances of continuing the cycles of abuse that you've grown up with diminish. And then we do programs throughout the year with that as well. And so Camp Hope is just this phenomenal, this year, 100 kiddos. We're going to Catalina Island. And we do these hope stories in the morning. Every kid at some point in camp gets an award. And some of these kids, you just never, it's one thing to give a kid an award. It's another thing to give a kid an award that's never been recognized for anything, and to share with them the value of what they bring to the world. And so this program is designed to just break the cycle of domestic and sexual violence. That's it. That's its only goal. And we just do that through camp and year-round activities with the kiddos.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You do a lot of great stuff.
Well, thank you.
So in preparing for this, I came across Channel 13 Investigates segment.
Yes.
Are you familiar with this?
Oh, just a tad.
I thought it was a 6-part series. You told me no, it's really not. 9-part
pretty
series.
Pretty much a Netflix series at this point.
I don't know if you're actually the star. I only watched a few of them. I didn't go through the whole 9.
Yeah.
You think you're not the star, are you?
I'm certainly the last one is the one where she really comes after me. Season 8. So thank gosh, no. Segment 8, she ends by saying the community values Safe Nest, and Safe Nest brings a lot of value, which I appreciated. And then she goes, but their leadership is the problem. And then that 9th and last segment, unfortunately, has a former staff person on there just saying things that are absolutely untrue about my leadership. So it's unfortunate. Certainly the timing was bad as it related to some county monies that had been put aside for One Safe Place, $7.8 million that were retracted because of these stories. So, I hope Channel 13 is proud of itself for eliminating funding for domestic violence in the city, but Yeah. It was, and she knew I had cancer. She knew I was leaving for a bone marrow transplant, and she ran these stories, started these stories before I was even recovered, before I was even out of the hospital, and then continued to sort of like ask me to be on camera. And like,
this gets better and better.
I can't even make it from my bed to the bathroom right now.
Why did you say yes?
We didn't say yes. So what happened was
to being on camera.
So I went on camera an hour before I left for the bone marrow transplant. But the way that she sort of garnered the story was like, hey, I have some questions about SafeNest. We knew she had been reaching out. The reason we knew she was reaching out was because she called a staff person's mother and was like, hey, do you know your daughter works for SafeNest? What do you know about it? Right. And that the mom called us and was like in tears because she was very flustered. And then she reached out to the staff person for whom's mother that was. And the staff person was like, you need to talk to our marketing department. This is all happening days before I'm leaving for this bone marrow transplant. And so, we asked for the questions and we have learned a lot in this experience. I will say if anybody has the lens of Channel 13 turned on them, get an attorney, a reputation attorney right up front, and a crisis communications person, because I do a lot of media. Most of that media is educational. I wouldn't say it, and it's friendly, but it's elevating for the movement. So Darcy only sent us the questions a couple hours before the interview, and that should have been our indicator. So we made a mistake. We should have said, no, sorry, we haven't had enough time to prepare, but we were feeling this pressure because I was leaving and was going to be out of the office for a month. So unfortunately, that was our first mistake.
No, I chuckled because it's not like you're leaving on a vacation.
No, yeah, certainly. Right? I wish, but so yeah. And then and unfortunately I did that interview with her and shared with her a lot of things that were like, yeah, we understand, our low barrier shelter, but here's all the procedures. And what you don't see in any of her videos, which I highlighted for her several times, is you don't see staff acting inappropriately in any way. And what you don't see is the 3 seconds after that video is shot, when staff arrive on scene, break up those fights or whatever is going on, and then the hours of de-escalation we put into those clients, right? Because most people would watch that and go, my God, you need to kick all those people out. And I would say most of these fights are happening, and we don't have a lot of fights. Our primary 911 call is medical, by the way, like people having a breathing problem or something's going on. But we do have physical altercations. Staff break them up. Metro is generally called and comes and helps. But what they don't see is in the hours of de-escalation, trying to help someone who has spent their whole life in violence find a different way to navigate conflict, right? And I'm not going to throw people out at 3 a.m, 2 a.m. to be on the street. We don't do that, And so I'm saddened by the stories only because I feel like there was such a great opportunity for Channel 13 to come in and elevate and help educate about how under-resourced the movement is. But instead, it's just been her coming after us.
So I'm like preparing for this. I see this and I start getting into these things. I watched the first few. As an outsider looking in, here's some observations.
Yeah.
Why does Channel 13 Investigate exist? So I looked that up, and here's like a quote. So it's to conduct in-depth reporting on issues affecting the Las Vegas community, aiming to uncover truth, hold those in power accountable, and bring about positive change. This aligns with KTNV's broader commitment to making Las Vegas a better place for its residents by addressing everyday problems and asking tough questions. Cool. I'm all for that. Yep. Everything they just said. I love this. Good job. Some of the things I'm like thinking, okay, hold those in power accountable. So they're holding you accountable because you are in power. Good for you. Now I could see giving them the benefit of the doubt. They interviewed several people that were in the shelter who are now presented as victims of these horrible conditions.
Right.
So maybe they're trying to shed light on that we need to improve these conditions for the people that come here. Now I get into what were they trying to accomplish? If it is to improve conditions of the shelter for these people, let's talk about how effective it was to spend production dollars on 9 series They could literally have just taken the money and put it into the shelter to improve conditions. That could be one option, and they would make Las Vegas a better place for residents. The part about holding you to power, segment 3 was follow the money. Let me see if follow the money.
Yeah.
Okay, so I could see we can't give this shelter money because you're if I give you any resources, you're going to squander the hell out of them.
Yeah.
So the way that they were following the money, they highlighted 2 things. One was your salary and your COO salary, which is public apparently. I'm not going to say what it is. You can go look for it if you want. But I know from other people in nonprofits, you could take your experience, your credentials, your track record, and you could easily make double with stock options. I don't imagine SafeNest offers you stock options.
No.
Your CO could certainly leave tomorrow and make probably a chunk more. So good job holding you to power. I don't know. A lot of it just bothered me. Oh, the other thing was they went through your financials, which are audited financials. So first of all, good for you. This was one of my reactions. Oh, good. It's a nonprofit that abides by the auditing laws or regulations that you're doing. They showed that you make $2 million. I think that's what they highlight after all the expenses and whatnot, which by the way, I'm like, that's really good.
And
that's what
it's hilarious. Well, what she didn't, so she doesn't know how to read a 990, right? Which any financial document, unless it's like the annual reporting for the year, is a point in time document. So sadly, one of our benefactors had passed away and left us in their will. And that payment for that was the award for that, or award's a funny word. The gift was $2 million. We got that 3 days before the end of the fiscal year.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah. So if
I'm thinking literally the way that they presented it, though, I'm like, wow, this is not just a fiscally responsible organization. Like, they make money. And I know enough about nonprofits to know that it's not going into your pocket because by the way, she said your compensation is public. So it's not like you can funnel $2 million to your pocket, this person in power. I think what she was trying to say is you have $2 million, but you're not taking care of the people in this shelter,
right,
is what she was trying to say. And then the other thing that was highlighted is this audit had some comment on an employee opened a PayPal account.
Yes.
Then I think she didn't say it in these words, but no money went into that account.
Right.
And so why would you even say that?
Right. Right.
So someone opened a PayPal account, the audit caught it. I imagine now you say, oh, we shouldn't be doing that.
Right.
Or now you put the control down. That's why you have an audit. But nothing, it's like, good job on your investigative journalism.
Right. Right.
What did you show us?
A PayPal account has money coming into it, not going out of it. So it's not like money
I didn't even
from
think
the
about
agency
that, right?
went away, right?
Yeah.
And it was just set up by somebody preparing actually for the 5K registrations, and they just set up an accidental. You've got all your codes and everything, and it was an honest mistake, and we now have a financial protocol for that, but it was certainly nothing nefarious. And we are platinum status on GuideStar, which is the highest rating you can have by that platform.
So talk more about GuideStar.
Yeah, so GuideStar, for any donor out there, or really anybody that's interested in an agency, all nonprofits over $500,000 are required to have an annual audit and then to post their financials on GuideStar, or the IRS posts them, whichever way it works. But you can go on there and you can see everybody's financials, which it contains any salaries in an organization, a nonprofit, that are over $100,000. And then it also gives you kind of a blanket rundown of our finances over the last 2 years. And you can also see if we're to give out any grant money, who we gave it to, all those kinds of things. So it's a very beneficial document. For donors, it's really helpful because you can just make sure that the organization you want to donate to, like if you were investing, it's in good standing.
And you're platinum.
And we're platinum. We're platinum rated on there. So yeah, when she started going,
was that in? I don't remember hearing that you were platinum in segment 3. Follow
she
the
did
money.
not. No, and she continued to talk about, I would hope that donors, to your point, and really anybody that's interested in SafeNest, we run business entities, and one of them is our donation center. We get £2 million pounds a year of.
That was the other one, right?
Yeah, of things donated to
You're getting
SafeNest.
all this stuff just given to you, but you're not giving it to them.
So we screen and we keep about 10% of it, because if anyone wants to do the square footage calculation on a warehouse of what it would cost me to keep every single item that's donated to us, inventory it, and then give it out to a survivor, you would know that that is not a successful financial proposition, right? So we screen and we keep what clients are asking for and what we think we will use in a 3-month turnover to keep inventory fluid. And then everything else we monetize through a contract that we've had for years with Savers. And that really helps fund the in-between stuff. You know, no donors running over to me and say, Liz, how can I fund that HVAC unit for you? It's like, okay. So as an agency, you should have, multiple revenue streams. And it certainly helped us during COVID, you know, survive and be able to thrive and provide all the services that were needed when other funding streams were diminished.
So I'll say one more thing and I'll end my rant.
Okay.
Here's an idea for Channel 13. I don't know if it's a separate thing than Channel 13 Investigates, but so they could achieve their mission to make Las Vegas a better place for its residents and all the other things, aiming to uncover truth, etc., fix the Las Vegas community. Here's an idea. Take your broadcasting resources and get Liz any of these 3 things. If it really bothered you about the shoes and the stuff that you're just giving and you're not giving out, they can get you a warehouse. Would you accept one if they got you one?
If they would pay for it for 10 years.
No, they're going to get you, they're going to use their broadcasting resources to create for you a warehouse for 10 years. That could be one. The other one we talked about, get you $250,000 from a donor, or they could donate it for these cameras.
Yeah.
That could actually
Like
save
that.
lives.
Yep.
Or get you resources for 300 more beds, shelters, one in each corner.
Yeah.
Nice ones, private rooms, minimize the fighting that they showcased and all that other stuff with a chef in each one. So the food that they showed wasn't all over the place.
Yeah. Survivors cook for themselves in our shelter. And if anyone's ever lived in a fraternity house or sorority
That's
house,
what I thought about that exactly.
Yeah. And what they don't show, too, is the phenomenal volunteers and staff that we have.
That's the part that, like, come on, guys. Like, what do you think is happening here?
I know. We're not living in filth. And the state came in and did a surprise investigation, and she reported on that, and I can't remember what segment number. But yes, there was some dust and debris in the hallway. Well, I can guarantee you, if you go to my house right now, there's also dust and debris in the hallway.
That's the worst that the state came up with?
The state did, and they pointed out that they didn't see a counseling calendar on the wall, which is, we don't post people's therapy appointments
that makes
publicly
sense.
Because, right? But that was it. There was no actionable findings.
You were very, by the way, I'll compliment you. You were very adamant about confidentiality.
Yeah.
There were some questions. You're like, you answer them not in a disrespectful way, but in a very clear way to express and demonstrate how much you guys hold confidentiality as a high priority.
Yeah, it's critical. I mean, I'm even frustrated today. They still have the faces of the 4 survivors who came forward and gave testimony on their website. And I'm like, look, you got to understand, even the video clips they used where they blurred out the faces, they're still, to someone who knows them, they're recognizable. And so you're unintentionally, first of all, it was very unfair for the survivors who took those videos to take those videos. They would not want those videos taken of them. I recognize why they feel like they had to do that, but at some point, KTNV, I would really appreciate that they come down for the ability for those survivors to move forward. But I will say this too, and I don't say this lightly. We take people into shelter who are at the highest stage of lethality in terms of being murdered. And while all 4 of the women who came forward, it's brave to come forward and speak on TV. And while I didn't care for the message, I still applaud them for that bravery. They are all still alive. And I know that feels like a baseline narrative.
Wow,
for
what
folks,
an irony, right?
But that's what we do, And one of the clients, we worked with her for 6 months, and she's relocated and getting her phlebotomy license and moving forward. And that's what we would hope for all of our clients.
So I just want to now really end the rant.
Okay.
So, once I organized a fundraiser, and someone that I look up to I invited them. They came. They gave money to the cause. And on his way out, he thanked me. He said, thank you for putting. I'm like, oh, thank you for coming. He's like, no. Thank you for organizing this. And he had to explain to me what he meant. Of course, I invited him. He came. He gave the money. I feel good. But no, thank you for organizing this. Why? Because I spent my time and my attention and whatever talent I gave to that thing to do that and to extend an invitation to him. So I created an opportunity for him to give with his financial resources, not with the time resources that he didn't have.
Yeah.
But he was grateful. That opened my eyes. You chose this position, CEO of SafeNest. We know what you make now, by the way, which we also know you can literally make double, but you don't. You chose this. You're doing great work in this community. I know personally people that appreciate the work that you're doing and your team is doing. So thank you, Channel 13, for giving me the opportunity to make sure to say thank you for the work that you're doing on behalf of a lot of us.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
How about some rapid fire takeaways?
Okay.
You talked about in one of the videos I saw, you have a program, I think it's called SIPS or something.
It's not ringing a bell.
You framed it. You worked with a CEO coach, local CEO coach, and either a brainstorming session.
Coffee program.
The coffee program.
Yes. So we have SafeNest Coffee, which is called Brewing Bold.
Okay.
And the whole idea behind SafeNest Coffee is that folks sign up, we mail it to your home. So it's mail order program or your business or whatever entity you'd like. And survivors are actually the ones working in the business. So as we grow, survivors now pack the coffee, get it ready to go. And they do that twice a month. But of course, we'd love the program to grow. So we have resources from that program then to train survivors in marketing and all kinds of things so they can be compensated and the program flourishes. So yeah, it's still in its infancy. My cancer kind of set back my pushing for that to go, but we have some great subscribers in the program, but we're looking forward to its growth.
Okay. Who is the CEO, the local CEO coach?
Yeah, Brad Mishlove of Catapult Group. Catapult Groups. Yes. There's Catapult Fundraising and Catapult Groups. Catapult Groups. Brad is phenomenal. I will shout out to Brad because when I started SafeNest was $3.7 million. I constantly didn't know if we were going to make payroll. Brad became my CEO coach through a mutual friend of ours, and the organization has flourished. And, sitting down with Brad is just, we walk through finances, we talk about HR things. He's a phenomenal support, and that group has been incredible for SafeNest.
You talked about a trauma score, and then you said hope score. What is a hope score? How does someone test themselves for hope?
I don't know if it's publicly available, but if you went on and Google and said hope scale, you might be able to find it. If someone's really interested, please, they can email me. There's a book called Hope Rising, and it's in there as well. And actually a couple different iterations of it. But yeah, it is interesting to know your hope score. And the scientific blend is, I know my future can be better than my present or my past, and I have the power to make that so. So what we're trying to at camp when we talk about hope score, and really with our abusive partners and our survivors, is no one's going to do this work but you, right? We're your guide, we're your empowerment, we're here to help, but we're not going to do the work. And so what's inside you to make it happen? And so really in the hope score, we're measuring what does that, do you have that power? And it's a great metric. I actually have been sort of trying to push for it to be the number one nonprofit metric to measure all nonprofits by in the Valley, because you're homeless and you get services. How did that affect your hope score? You're getting services through housing, certainly in the safety net, right? Even in the hospital, like, is your outlook better or not better? I think it's a really great metric to use.
What's on your list for one or two must-read books?
So right now I'm reading Battered Women's Project, which is from the 70s. It's an oldie, but it's important to understand our roots because I will say this lightly. I have a lot of respect for the women who pushed for our movement to start, but our movement was generally based on white feminist roots. which have not, in my interpretation, translated well to our diverse community of survivors that we serve. And so, but however, those roots create some legislative dissidence and movement dissidence in terms of change. So I'm reading that to sort of remind myself where that tension is, and then see how we can work around it together. And then I will recommend, as I mentioned it before, Hope Rising. Hope Rising for anybody in my line of work, or anybody that's dealing with a child who has depression, or any life circumstance that's kind of throwing you off your game. That book, Hope Rising, is it's a phenomenal way to look at the world in which we have to navigate in a way that you got it. You can do this. And it's not false happiness. It's true measured happiness.
Is there a podcast that you don't miss?
The Wall Street Journal, the Journal. I love politics and business. It's like a sickness, but and I get it in my job, but I really like the Journal.
What is the quote you most quote?
You probably heard it in my shout out from my staff, but I say onward and upward all the time. The other one I say that's not nice, because when I'm joking with my team, is it's hard to soar with the eagles when you work with turkeys. but we have a lot of fun in the office. But onward and upward is usually my the way I end most of my meetings, because that's the only way to go for us. Too much work to do to go in any other direction.
How do you manage stress?
Well, I used to run. Now I sleep. Really, being on the other side of recovering from the transplant, I need like 12 hours a night. So I will crawl into bed. Usually my 12-year-old crawls in next to me, which I don't mind, because I know that won't last forever. But yeah. And playing with my dogs. I have 2 dogs too. So
what kind of dogs?
I have a Rhodesian Ridgeback.
I used to have one of those.
Very melodramatic. Mine is, she's on par with my 12-year-old in terms of the drama she brings to the house. And then we have a little Jack Russell. So,
how can people find you and connect into the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so anybody can email me. Probably the easiest email is info@safenest.org, and we'll get people to.
Do you check that one?
I do. Well, my marketing team checks it, but if it says, hey, to Liz, it's just easier to remember. If you want to get to me directly, it's LORT@safenest.org. And
so info@safenest.org.
Yeah, I think it's the easiest one. And then, yeah, if anyone out there is in crisis or needs help, please don't hesitate. You can text or call our hotline at 702-646-4981. If you want to have a private chat, you can go to safenest.org and open up a chat. Even if you are just, one of the most common questions we get is, I don't know if this is domestic violence. If you're having any kind of concerns, or even if you're having a concern about a friend or family member, don't hesitate to call. And if you're an abusive partner and you're struggling with rage control, or your kids look at you and are scared, or whatever's happening for you, we've got services to help, and you can get through this. So the same number, same information, and, we can end this for you.
What's the number again?
702-646-4981.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening. I would love to hear from you about your takeaways from this episode. Make sure to leave us a comment or leave us a review. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can hear future episodes as they come out. My name is Chaim Mizrahi. Tune in next time.